Hello everyone. In the last lesson, we explored conditional structures like basic if conditions, multiple, and nested conditions. Now, it is time to take it a step further with another powerful conditional tool in R, which happens to be the ifelse function. Unlike the basic conditional structures, the ifelse function is designed to work with vectors. So basically, you are just going to apply a test or a condition to each element of a vector and simply return a vector of output. So here is the syntax. The ifelse function takes three arguments: test, yes, no. The test actually happens to be the condition or the logical statement that you need to give it. The yes part is what gets executed if the condition or test is true, and the no argument is what also gets executed if the condition or test is false. So let's head to R and see how this works. Now in R, we begin with a very simple example. Let us go ahead and create an object called X and let's assign it a vector. So let's say we have 5, 9, 15 like this. So we go ahead and execute and we assign this vector to X. Now, let us look at the ifelse function and what details that we need to know. So we will type the question mark followed by the name of the function, and then we would execute and bring up the documentation on this particular function. So this one happens to be the conditional element selection. And most importantly, under the usage section, we are looking at the function and the various arguments that are found in there, which are test, yes, and no. And if we look at the explanation of the arguments, we see that the test happens to be an object which can be coerced to logical mode. Sometimes the documentation can be quite technical, but basically what this is saying is that you just simply need to write a condition that evaluates to true or false. The yes argument also goes ahead to return the values for true elements of test, which means if this particular condition that you write is actually true, this is what gets executed. And if it is false, then this is also what gets executed. So let's go ahead and demonstrate this here with our vector. So in that case, I'm simply going to go ahead and write the name of the function ifelse, and then the argument is test, and we are going to give it a condition. So let's write something like x greater than 10. And then we would go ahead and say yes equals. So this is what gets executed if this particular test or condition happens to be true. So let's go ahead and write something like high. And then let's also write the third argument, which is no. And let's go ahead and write something like low. So basically all that we are doing is that it is going to take every single element of this particular vector, compare with this test condition. So first of all, 5 is going to be compared to 10. So is 5 greater than 10? No. In that case, this is what actually gets executed, low. And then 9, is that greater than 10? No. So low also gets executed. And then 15 is now greater than 10 and returns high. But the output is going to be a vector likewise. So let's go ahead and execute this. And then we end up getting low, low, high. This is very useful when you are working with data frames because whenever you are accessing columns from a data frame, they usually present themselves as vectors, and it's very easy for you to work with this. So let's go ahead and have another example. Let's create another vector called gender. This time, we are just simply going to give it values like 1, 2, 1, and so on. Where, for example, 1 is going to be assigned the value of male and 2 assigned the value of female. So let's execute this line of code and let's print this gender and we get this vector of values. Now what you're going to create is going to be using the if-else function. And all that we are going to do is now pass the test. So what is going to be the test? The test is going to be gender equals 1. Now, if you find that the name of the argument is actually giving you trouble because there are only 3 arguments that this function takes, then it's expedient you can actually ignore the name of the argument and go ahead with whatever you want to put in there. So I would just simply say gender equals 1. And then for the yes part, I would simply say male. And for the no part, I would say female. So this means that we are saying if else, gender equals this value of 1, then just simply make it male, and then any other number that exists again in this vector, just simply go ahead and make it female. So in that case, just simply going to be the value 2. So if you now go ahead and execute this code, you end up getting male, female, male. And so this is how you can assign, for example, gender labels to values that you have created for this particular variable. So I hope this actually makes sense. Let's have another example, and this time we are simply going to create marital status. So in this case, we are saying that we have the value of 1 representing someone who is single, 2 for married, 3 for widowed, 4 for separated, and 5 for divorced. So how do we actually do this? First of all, let us create a variable object called marital, and let's have a vector of these combination of numbers. So I will just go ahead and write all of these numbers like that. And so now that we have created this vector, let's go ahead and execute. And now we want to ensure that when the value is 1, it is assigned the value of single. If it is 3, that is widowed. If it is 4, that is separated, and so on. So we will go ahead and now create another variable. Let's actually call it marital status. And we will now initiate the ifelse function. Let's clear the console first of all. And let's now begin with the ifelse function. So if else, like this, and the test, which is the very first argument, is going to be marital equals 1. So if marital is the value of 1 in this particular vector, we are going to go ahead and replace it with the value single. Then for the no part, now this is very tricky, so look at this very carefully. For the no part, I am also going to initiate another if else because we do have several other values. Unlike the gender where we had only 2 values, and so when gender equals 1, we say that is male. Otherwise, any other value that is there presents itself as female. But for marital status, you would see that we have 1, 2, 3, up to 5. So it means that we cannot just simply give another value. Otherwise, any other value apart from 1 will be given that no argument value that you give it here. So all we have to do is now initiate another if else function. Now in this case, that is going to be quite long if I go ahead and write this here. So what I'm going to do right now is just break this to the next line, and then I would continue my code. So here, I'm also going to go ahead and say if else marital equals 2, then go ahead and actually make it married. Then here, if it is also not equals 2, then what do we actually do? We would go ahead and break it down and initiate another if else function, and then we would go ahead and say marital equals 3, go ahead and make it widowed. Then comma, again, we are not done yet because there is still another set of 2 values that we need to complete. So we will break it down and initiate another if else function and say again marital equals 4, make it separated. And then because the number 5 is the very last value, we don't need to actually initiate any if else function again. All we have to do is pass whatever number is left will be used for the very last label, which is divorce. So let's now go ahead and make it this much bigger, the window. So basically all that we are doing is that since we have 1 to 5, we are saying if else marital equals 1, make it single. Otherwise, if else marital equals 2, make it married. Otherwise, if else marital equals 3, make it widowed. Otherwise, if else marital equals 4, make it separated. And if there is any other number that is left, which of course is 5, make it divorced. And so if we go ahead and execute these lines of code, and now we print the marital status, you would notice that the labels have been rightly assigned to the various numbers. So 1 here would be single and 5 here would be divorced, just like we have in the label. So this is how we actually use the if else function. It'll come in handy when we're working with data frames.